Hello, everyone. This is My Two Cents. Welcome to part 2 of my debunking of the Right to Reasons video, Why You Should Be a Socialist. Last time, we demonstrated that Mr. Stanley was completely wrong when it came to the history behind the Great Depression and the New Deal. Suffice it to say that the facts he presented were false, and therefore not an argument as to why we should embrace socialism. Today, we're going to be looking at the comments he makes about Marxism and socialism itself, along with a wonderful clip from everyone's favorite democratic socialist, Bernie Sanders. Before we begin, I would like to point out that Mr. Stanley actually commented on the previous video saying that he loved it and that we can both agree that the Fed should be audited. Mr. Stanley, thank you for that, and I am in complete agreement that the Fed is a huge scam that needs to go away. However, I still hold that there are excellent reasons why you should not be a socialist. Let's get into those reasons.
Now, rather than saying World War II saved us from the Great Depression, it'd be a clearer understanding of history to say the Great Depression actually caused World War II. The financial stress of the Depression in Europe led the Germans to elect someone saying he's going to make their country great again by making great deals and getting rid of people based on race. Sound familiar?
Another effort to compare Donald Trump to Hitler. First, a concession to Mr. Stanley. Yes, hyperinflation of the German mark was one of the factors that Adolf Hitler was able to exploit in his efforts to rise to power. However, this, I would say, is an argument for getting rid of the Fed, the very entity that is largely responsible for the Great Depression, as we showed last time, and as it seems that we are, in fact, in agreement on that. In fact, former Fed chairman Ben Bernanke made a remarkable admission when he said, "Regarding the Great Depression, we did it. We're very sorry, and we won't do it again," stated on November 8th, 2002. But the thing about calling Trump Hitler, it's easy to call someone Hitler. This is a standard scare tactic of the left. Ronald Reagan is literally Hitler. George Bush is literally Hitler. Donald Trump is literally Hitler. It's getting old, okay? The left has called so many people Hitler that this objection has really ceased to have any meaning. But just for fun, let's do a little compare and contrast and find out of the last two political candidates in the 2016 election, whose policies really more closely resembled Hitler's policies, Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. Gun control. Hitler, like many other dictators of history, knew that an armed populace could potentially stand in the way of his rise to power, and so he used the gun registry of the previous government in order to confiscate guns from his political opponents and from Jews. Now, yes, I know, the left wants to say that he allowed some Germans who supported him to keep their firearms, which is true, but the fact is Hitler used gun registration and gun control to consolidate his power. Which political candidate supported gun registry and more gun control? Economic policy. Well, it is an oft-forgotten fact that Nazi is in fact an abbreviation for the National Socialist German Workers' Party. Think about everything that socialists like Bernie Sanders say about the 1% and income inequality. Okay, Nazi economics. Take everything that liberals today say about the 1%, omit the words 1%, insert the word Jews, and bam, you've basically got the Nazi strategy for how they funded their efforts. The Nazis seized the wealth of German Jews in order to fund their efforts. However, this still wasn't enough, and they were ultimately forced to implement a 50% surtax on most German groups. So once again, tell me, which candidate do you think more closely embodied policies similar to those of Adolf Hitler?
So then, what is socialism? Here is an interview between Bill Maher and Bernie Sanders that might help explain this concept.
We have to teach Americans what this is.
We do.
And I don't know if we're doing that yet.
Okay.
I don't think most Americans realize they're already socialists.
In certain respects, okay.
Okay, the fact that Bill Maher would say that we're already socialists shows that he doesn't understand what socialism is. Having government services that are publicly funded through taxes does not necessarily make a country socialist. Granted, the larger the welfare state becomes, the more the economy begins to reflect socialist ideals, but that doesn't make the country socialist. Socialism, in its truest economic sense, refers to a centrally planned economy, such as what existed in the USSR. In a centrally planned economy, bureaucrats dictate exactly how many goods and services will be produced and by whom. Soviet planners told individual workers' unions exactly how many tractors to build, how many fur coats to produce, to build a new dam on the Volga River, how many new roads and railroads to construct, and so on and so forth. When two different workers' unions claimed that they both needed the same resource, and said resource was too scarce for both of them to have it, it was up to central planners to decide who ultimately got the resource, if anyone. A welfare state, on the other hand, can exist alongside a market economy, such as the system that is used in Sweden and the other Nordic countries. In this case, while the market still operates as a free market in many ways, although it really isn't free, that's not an appropriate word in this case, the government collects wealth from higher earners and distributes it to lower earners by way of social programs. This is much closer to socialism in principle, but it is still not a centrally planned economy. Granted, I think a welfare state is a stupid idea, and as we increase it, it's already having horrible effects here in the United States, but it's still important to distinguish this from socialism proper.
Let's start off with what it is not what we want to change. We want to deal with the grotesque level of income and wealth inequality in America. Very few people think it is acceptable or moral that the top 0.1% owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. That we have seen a proliferate.
Ah, yes, Bernie, that income inequality that you're so passionate about. Well, CNNBC, which is not a conservative source by any stretch of the imagination, reports that Sanders made more than $1 million last year, and is thus a proud member of the 1% that he so despises. Tell me, Senator Sanders, how much of your personal funds have you donated to charity? How many refugees and homeless persons have you invited into your home? Wait, homes, because you own 3. One of which is a $600,000 beachfront residence. You see, people like Bernie, Clinton, and other libtards talk a big game about how important it is to fix income inequality, but you don't really see them donating their own vast fortunes to help fix the problem. Hypocrites much?
But see, Bernie, you always say that, and I think even the Republicans are not for income inequality. They hear that, but it doesn't compute that that's going to be solved by socialism. Socialism is the programs they already like. They like Social Security. That's socialism. But they like Medicare. They like the VA. They like the military.
Now, that's exactly right.
Well, I can't speak for Republicans because I'm not one, but seriously, Bill, of all those examples you cited, you think those are examples of successes of socialism? For the sake of time, let's just look at one. The VA, how's that turning out?
Major thanks. Criminal charges are possible in the veterans' health care scandal, according to the VA's Inspector General. On Monday, the department released an audit of VA hospitals and clinics across the country. It shows 57,000 military veterans have been waiting more than 3 months to see a doctor, and another 64,000 appear to have fallen through the cracks. As Wyatt Andrews reports, from Washington, those veterans enrolled for care but never got an appointment. Wyatt, good morning.
Good morning. This audit reveals not only the number of veterans waiting for their first appointments, but a widespread scheme inside the VA to hide those wait times because bonuses were on the line. Just after the report was released, one top VA official appeared on Capitol Hill last night to explain and to apologize. The audit explains that at 76% of the clinics surveyed, at least one VA scheduler said workers were ordered by supervisors to alter wait time reports in the VA's computers. A whistleblower at the Hines VA Hospital in Illinois demonstrated for CBS News. The manipulation was to change the veteran's desired date for care to whenever the next appointment was, even if months away. When the desired date is the appointment date, here's what the computer shows.
The computer sees no wait time.
At the hearing, the VA's acting inspector general, Richard Griffin, said 69 VA medical centers are now under criminal investigation. That's up from 26 last month.
Interesting to note, the VA is by definition a single-payer healthcare system, the thing that Bernie Sanders wants to institute for all of America.
Already a socialist country.
But what we have to, no, it's not a socialist country.
It's quasi.
Quasi. There are some socialist programs. But what we have got to do is remind fellow Americans that every other major country on earth guarantees health care to all people as a right, and they do it more cost effectively than we do. We have got to inform the American people that we are the only major country on earth that doesn't guarantee paid family and medical leave. We have got to...
The thing about saying that healthcare is a right. Healthcare requires the labor of doctors, nurses, and other medical staff, as well as adequate healthcare facilities, medical supplies, technology. You can declare that healthcare is a right all day, but that doesn't change the reality of scarcity. To quote Thomas Sowell's Basic Economics, if the government today were to come up with a plan for universal access to beachfront homes and put caps on the prices that could be charged for such property, that would not change the underlying reality of the extremely high ratio of people to beachfront land. With a given population and a given amount of beachfront property, rationing without prices would have to take place by bureaucratic fiat, political favoritism, or random chance. But the rationing would still have to take place. Even if the government were to decree that beachfront homes were a basic right of all members of society, that would still not change the underlying scarcity in the slightest. So it is with healthcare. What Bernie and other advocates of universal healthcare don't understand is that when you give the government exclusive control over healthcare, you now create the problem of who is responsible for rationing what healthcare services we have, as well as you deteriorate the quality of those healthcare services since there is no competition to incentivize good customer service. This is why in more and more European countries, euthanasia is becoming an option for the elderly, and why people are waiting for months for cancer surgery while others are getting breast augmentations. However, when healthcare is privatized, medical providers and insurance companies alike have no choice but to improve their services and make them affordable in order to be competitive in the market. I'll leave a link to Hoodie Demon's video that absolutely demolishes the idea of universal healthcare.
Remind the American people that there's something a little bit crazy when in America we have more people in jail, disproportionately people of color, than any other major country on earth.
As to the thing about racial inequality amongst prison populations, whose fault would that be exactly? Well, thanks to the policies of progressive folks like Bernie, most black neighborhoods are riddled by dependence on welfare, which leaves them no incentive to pull themselves up out of poverty. I mean, why would you work if you can just rely on a steady paycheck from the government? Single motherhood already dominates the black community, which is why it's not surprising that blacks commit 52% of crime despite making up only 13% of the population. Absent fathers have long shown correlation with the capacity for criminality. Further, when black children are taught that they've been born into an oppressive society run by whites and that no amount of hard work could ever allow them to succeed unless they're coddled by affirmative action and other condescending policies put in place by white men like Bernie, is it really a surprise that they don't try hard in school or seek to be productive members of society?
So here's another way of looking at it, and I got to warn you, Chomsky's a little dry, but bear with him because this is important.
This is deeply ingrained in people's understanding and consciousness and barely below the surface. In fact, it's a call for essentially extension of democracy to the industrial sphere and to communities as well. We should also bear in mind that the leading American social philosopher, John Dewey, who's as mainstream as apple pie, his main work was concentrated on democracy. He pointed out over and over again that as long as we have what he called industrial feudalism, that is a tyrannical control, private power controlling production commerce, democracy will be very limited. We have to move to what he called industrial democracy if we hope to have significant democracy. As for politics, his position was that until that happens, politics will be the shadow cast over society by big business. And I think most of the population recognizes that and accepts it.
So this fellow wants to cite John Dewey and his progressive philosophy about comparing socialism to an extension of democracy. Just a note about John Dewey, the so-called father of the American public school system. Remind me again how well American public schools are doing these days? Not sure I would trust John Dewey's ideas given that American children are consistently growing dumber due to his abysmal failures. For those of you who would like to learn a little bit more about what a piece of human garbage John Dewey was, check out Crimes of the Educators, How Utopians Are Using Government Schools to Destroy America's Children.
You have been conditioned by banks and corporations lobbying your representatives and controlling your education and the media to believe socialism is synonymous with communism or fascism. Socialism is not a bad word. It's actually a natural result to every modern economic system that exists all around us.
You're right that socialism is not synonymous with communism, but according to Marx, the guy whose picture is over your shoulder, it was a transitionary step towards communism. However, yes, I would certainly say that socialism is a naughty word. To quote Ben Shapiro,
socialism violates at least 3 of the basic 10 commandments for those who still care. It makes government into God. It suggests that you can steal from people if you vote for it. And it says that it is good to be covetous of your neighbor's ass. Right? For Bill Clinton, it has a different meaning. But
Simply put by Marx, socialism is when a population collectively owns and controls the means of production and distributes the end result proportionally. Control of this distribution is usually delegated to the state, which, if run democratically, allows more people more control over the economy than if you simply left it to the markets.
yes, I would say that is an accurate definition of socialism. But have you stopped to consider what collective ownership really means? It means that no one person is responsible for what is owned. It's everyone's responsibility. Remember when you were in school and the teacher assigned you a group project? If you were lucky, maybe you would get paired with a really smart kid who would do the whole project himself, and then you wouldn't have to do any work. But what happens when 4 lazy kids got paired together? Well, it was no individual person's job to actually get started on the project. Everyone would just procrastinate until the last possible moment, hoping that someone else would take care of the project first. But then finally, with like 5 hours left before the project's due, they'd realize that they had to do something and throw together some piss-poor piece of work which might earn them a D, or maybe they would just not do it and decide to get an F. This is essentially what collective ownership means. If there is no specific owner responsible for the property, then no one will take responsibility for the property and it will ultimately break down. Tell me, what comes to mind when you hear the word public toilet? That's all you should need to know about collective ownership. As for distributing the end result proportionally, think of what happens if a farm is collectively owned by 5 people. Suppose 2 people work in the field every day, while the other 3 stay home and drink beer. Socialism would dictate that when harvesting time comes, all 5 people get 1/5 of the produce. This might sound good to you, but only if you're the lazy bum who stayed home. If you're the person who worked, tell me, why would you keep working under such a system?
Known as laissez-faire. Be careful not to commit the slippery slope fallacy here by thinking that I am proposing pure socialism. Pure socialism would be just as detrimental to society as pure democracy. It was John Winthrop, when referring to pure democracy, who said it to be the worst form of all government. But that doesn't stop us from utilizing the obvious benefits of democracy while we restrain it with something like the Bill of Rights, for example.
Well, I do agree with him here. It's been appropriately said that democracy in its purest form is 2 wolves and a lamb voting on what's for dinner. Democracy is simply mob rule, which is why the Founding Fathers specifically rejected it as a system as a whole. However, since he's not advocating for pure democracy combined with his socialism, he will need a central planning authority responsible for the redistribution of the wealth. Tell me, what will stop the central planning authority from becoming corrupt? To whom will the central planning authority be accountable to? This is the very problem that we saw in the Soviet Union.
In the same sense, you must utilize the benefits of socialism, and like Roosevelt, use it to direct the free market. Socialism exists whether you reject it or not.
Slavery also continues to exist whether you reject it or not. It does not make it a moral or an effective practice simply because it exists.
The same socialist strategies that we've been told by the top 1%, the bourgeoisie, not to take advantage of, are being used by the bourgeoisie when they socialize their risk and privatize their profits. Socialism is the progressive result of the liberal concept of the Enlightenment. Your war is not overseas. In fact, just to kind of get off track, name one freedom that's being protected for you in the Middle East right now. Your war is a class war. So to quote Marx's Communist Manifesto, proletarians of all countries, unite.
Okay, there is a lot of stuff in that last segment that I don't think is particularly relevant. However, as to proletarians uniting, maybe you should unite against Bernie, since he happens to be one of those 1%ers that you hate. But there is something to be said about Marx's philosophy. If it's so great, how come every country that's ever tried it either failed or was forced to begin transitioning back towards a market economy? The Soviet Union and China being the 2 greatest examples of this. Mr. Stanley, can you give me an example of a socialist economy, and by that I mean a centrally planned economy, that consistently thrives and produces better results than its capitalist neighbors? If socialism is so great, why are refugees still fleeing to the United States, and not to socialist paradises like Cuba, Venezuela, or North Korea? That's my 2 cents. Take it for what it's worth. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you liked this video, please hit like and subscribe. You can also hit the bell to make sure you're notified every time I upload a new video. To follow me on Twitter, Minds.com, VidMe, or WordPress, check out the links in the description. If you'd like to hear my 2 cents on any topic, leave a comment below. New uploads are every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, so stay tuned for more videos.